People who weren't there always ask me the same thing, and they ask it the same way. They lean in a little, the way you lean toward a fire, and they say, "What did it feel like the first time?" As if there were one feeling and I had it filed away somewhere, ready to hand over. As if the moment a species learns what it is sitting across the table from could be folded down into a single word and passed around at supper. I have stopped trying to give them the word they want. I tell them instead about the dark, because the dark is where it started, and because the dark is the only part of it I can be sure I remember exactly as it was. I was 61 days into a long screen flying point for the cruiser Lodestar, and I had been alone with the dark for most of those days. That is what a recon pilot is for. You go out ahead of the heavy ships, far enough that your own fleet stops being a comfort and starts being a rumor, and you put your eyes on the places the big sensors cannot reach without lighting themselves up like a lantern in a cellar. You go quiet, and you go small, and you go first. They called me Lantern, which was a joke, because the whole point of my work was to carry no light at all. The system I was mapping had no name then. It has a number now and a treaty attached to the number, and I expect there are people alive today who think the number is the important part. It was a dead place. A dim red star, old and swollen and going out the slow way, throwing off just enough light to make the dusk glow and not enough to warm anything. Around it, the wreckage. That was the first thing the survey told me. Before I was close enough to see any of it with my own eyes, the system was full of the dead. Hulls. Thousands of them drifted into long lazy rivers by the star's weak pull, turning end over end in the cold. Somebody had been killed here, a long time ago, in numbers I did not have a feel for. The metal was old enough that the radiation scars on it had faded to nothing. Whoever they had been, they were past being avenged. I sat in my Scout with the cabin lights off and the heater turned down to keep my signature small, and I watched the dead river of ships go by under me, and I will tell you the truth. I did not feel like a hunter, and I did not feel like prey. I felt like a man walking through a graveyard at night with his collar up, trying not to wake anybody. That is the honest answer to the question people ask me, if they would only sit still for it. Before the rest of it happened, before any of the things they want to hear about, there was just a tired old pilot in a cold cabin, going quiet through a place full of the dead, minding his manners. I logged the wrecks. I tagged the larger ones for the Lodestar's analysts to chew on later, because dead ships tell you things: who built them, who killed them, what the killing had cost. I noted that the kills were old and clean, that there were almost no escape pods in the drift, that whoever had done this had done it thoroughly and had not been in a hurry. I noted all of it the way you note the weather, and then I started my long curve back toward the screen, and that is when the system stopped being empty. It was not a sensor return at first. It was an absence of one. There is a thing the void does when something is moving through it under power, even quiet power, even careful power. It pushes the dust. You do not see the ship. You see the wake, the faint comb marks in the drift where something large has parted the dead river and let it close behind. I had been staring at that river for hours. I knew its grain. And the grain was wrong, off to my dim side, low and long. 4 separate parting lines moving in a loose curve that was bending, slowly, patiently, toward me. I want to be careful here, because this is the part where the people listening always start to build the story they expect, and the story they expect is the wrong one. They picture me grabbing the stick and slamming the throttle and screaming a warning into the comm. None of that happened. The first thing I did was nothing. I sat absolutely still and I watched the 4 parting lines, and I let the math arrive on its own. 4 of them, loose curve. Not a search pattern. A search pattern fans out and stays even. This was bending. It was tightening. The 4 lines were not looking for something. They had found it and they were beginning the long, unhurried business of closing on it, and it was me. I had been hunted before. Every recon pilot has. You learn the feel of being on someone's board, the prickle at the back of the neck that comes before the sensors confirm it. But this was different, and it took me a moment to put my finger on the difference. And when I did, the cold in the cabin got into me in a way the heater could not have fixed. The 4 ships were not in a hurry. They were not trying to box me before I bolted. They were closing the way you close on something that does not yet know it has been seen, the way a thing with all the time in the world closes on a thing with none. They were not afraid of losing me. The thought had not occurred to them. To them, I was already caught. The closing was just the part that came before the eating. I keyed the screen channel low power tight beam back along the bearing where the lodestar should be. Lantern to screen. I have 4 contacts, sublight formation closing on my position. Wakes only, no active emissions, no hail. Reading as deliberate, reading as hostile. I said it flat. You train the fear out of your voice before you ever fly point. A shaking transmission is worse than no transmission. Holding quiet, holding position. Will not bolt unless fired on. Advise. The answer took 11 seconds, which is a long time when 4 things are bending toward you out of a graveyard. When it came, it was Brant herself, the Lodestar's captain, not the watch officer, which told me the bridge had already gone tight. Oral Brant had a voice like a closed door. Screen copies, Lantern. Hold quiet, hold position. Do not light up. We see your wakes. We are reading the 4. Stand by. A pause. You are doing exactly right. Stay small. Stay small. That was the doctrine, and it was a good doctrine, and I believed in it the way you believe in the things that have kept you alive. A scout is a mouse. A mouse does not win by being brave. A mouse wins by being somewhere the cat is not looking. I throttled back until I was barely making way. I let my scout's hull go cold and dumb, and I drifted in the dead river with the other corpses and watched the 4 hunters come. And I told myself I was a piece of wreckage. Just one more old kill turning end over end in the dark. Nothing to see here. Nothing worth the trouble. Did not work. I knew it had not worked when the lead wake stopped bending and went straight. They had me. Not my wake me. They had cut through the trick. The lead ship came out of the drift and lit itself, just for an instant, just long enough for me to see it, and I have thought about that instant more than I have thought about almost anything else in my life, because I am certain now that it was not an accident. They wanted me to see. The flash was a hand on a shoulder. It said, "We know you are there." It said, "Look at what is coming." What was coming was beautiful, in the way that a blade is beautiful. I had expected something brutal, something blunt, the kind of warship you build when all you care about is putting a wall of metal between yourself and harm. This was the opposite. The ship was long and narrow and curved, swept back like a thing built to move through water, and it was studded along its length with what I first took for sensor spines and understood, a heartbeat later, were weapons, rows of them ranked and forward-facing, the way a predator's teeth are ranked and forward-facing, because a predator only ever needs to bite in one direction. It had no flat surfaces I could see. Everything about it was made to slip and to strike. It was a talon. I did not have their word for it yet, but I named it right the first time just looking at it. A talon ship, and behind it, lighting in sequence as if on a count, the other 3. Then they hailed me. I had not expected that either. I had thought a thing that closes on you that's certain would not bother to speak. What is there to say to meet? But the hail came, and it was not words at first. It was a pattern, a long structured pulse across the spectrum, and the Lodestar's analysts later told me it was almost certainly sent rendered into signal. That these creatures, whatever else they were built around smell the way we are built around sight, and that they had taken the language of their bodies, the chemistry of dominance and submission and hunger and fear, and pushed it up into radio, because that was the only way to throw it across the distance between ships. They were not hailing me the way a captain hails a captain. They were doing the thing a pack does when it has surrounded something. They were announcing themselves to the kill. The Lodestar's people worked fast. By the time the pattern had repeated twice, they had a rough read on it, and Brant put it through to me in a tight-clipped string of the analyst's best guesses, because I was the one in the water and I had a right to know what the water was. The pattern resolved more or less into 3 ideas, repeated and braided. The first idea was a name or a rank or both. The thing leading the 4 called itself, as near as we could ever render it, First Hunter Sekul, and First Hunter was not a job. It was a station, A thing you became by killing your way to the front of the pack and staying there. The second idea was a question. It was the only real question they had. I would learn, the question they asked of every new thing in the universe, the question their whole civilization was built to ask and to answer. And the third idea was the answer they had already chosen, because to them, the question and the answer were almost the same gesture. The question was, are you prey or are you hunter? And the answer Sekhill had already filed before I had said a single word back, before they had laid eyes on anything but a small cold craft drifting alone in a graveyard 1,000 light years from anything that could be its home. The answer was prey. Of course it was. Look at it from where they sat. A single small ship, alone, quiet, hiding among the dead, trying to look like a corpse, running cold, doing all the things a frightened small thing does. Everything I had done to stay alive, every piece of good mouse doctrine, every careful trick of going dark and going small and going still, every one of those things to a Korvath was a confession. Prey hides, prey runs cold, prey holds its breath and prays the big thing passes. I had spent 61 days learning to act exactly like the thing they hunted, and I had done it beautifully. And now 4 of them were closing on me with the patience of creatures who had never in their long, bloody history found the answer to be anything but the one they expected. I understood all of this in pieces over years with the help of people far smarter than me. But I understood the shape of it right there in the cabin in the cold, watching the 4 Talon ships fan into a slow killing arc around my position. I understood that I had been weighed and found to be food. And I will tell you what that does to a man because nobody tells you this part, and it is the truest part. It is not fear exactly. Fear is sharp and clean and you can use it. This was duller and worse. It was insult. Some old, deep animal part of me, the part that does not care about doctrine or treaties or the careful math of survival, sat up in the dark and said, no, not me. You do not get to decide that about me. You have not even seen me yet, and you have already decided what I am for. That was the moment. People want the moment to be the warship arriving, the guns, the fire. The moment was smaller than that, and it was mine alone, in a cold cabin with 4 predators tightening around me and no one to perform it for. The moment was a tired old pilot deciding, against every instinct that had kept him alive, against the doctrine he believed in, against the plain arithmetic that said run and pray, deciding not to run, not out of courage. I want to be honest because the people who weren't there always reach for courage, and courage is too clean a word. I did not run because I would not give them the confession. I would not show them the one thing that would prove their answer right. Prey runs. I would not run. So I did the thing that, of everything I did that day, I am still least able to explain. I turned my lights on. Cabin lights, hull running lights, every dumb little glow on the scout that I had spent 2 days killing. I lit myself up like a lantern in a cellar, like the joke of my calcine made real, and I held my position, and I let 4 apex predators see exactly where I was and exactly that I was not hiding anymore. I keyed my own transmitter, not the tight beam back to the fleet, the open one, the loud one pointed straight at the lead Talon ship. And I did not send words because they did not have my words and I did not have theirs. I sent a steady tone. 1 note. Held. The simplest signal a machine can make. The signal that says only, I am here, I am here, I am here, and I am not going to stop being here. I held the note, and I held my position, and I sat in my own light in the middle of a graveyard. And I waited for the apex predators of the known galaxy to come and find out. They had been wrong about something for the first time in a very long while. The comm crackled. Brant. Her closed-door voice had a crack in it now, very small, the kind only someone who knew her would hear. Lantern, what are you doing? Not running, Captain, I said. They've already decided what I am. I'm just declining to agree with them. A silence. Then, and I have never forgotten the exact words because they were the words that turned a man's stubbornness into something with a fleet behind it. Understood, Lantern. Hold your light. Hold your note. A pause that lasted a year. We are coming up behind you. Stay exactly where you are and keep being seen. We want them looking at you." I did not understand that last part, not then. I understood it later. Bran had grasped, faster than I could from inside my own little drama, what was actually happening out there in the dark, and she had grasped how to use it. The Korvath were fixed on me. 4 ships, every sensor, every scrap of attention, locked onto the one small, impossible thing that had turned on its lights and refused to flee. They were not watching their backs. Why would they? They were the apex. Nothing had ever needed them to watch their backs. The whole logic of being a Korvath was that you were the thing that came up behind, never the thing that got come up behind. And so while 4 Talon ships fanned in around a single defiant scout, certain to their bones that they had cornered the most interesting prey of the year, the cruiser Lodestar and her gun screen came up out of the dead river behind them, cold and dark, and exactly as quiet as I had been, and got into position, and waited for the predators to commit. I want to tell this part the way it happened to me, which is to say slowly because that is the cruelty of it. From my cabin I could not see the Lodestar. I could see only the 4 Talons closing and the dead light of the dim red star, and my own running lights throwing weak color on the dust around me. The lead Talon, Sekil, came in close, closer than it needed to. Close enough that I could see, in the star's faint glow and my own lights, the hull of the thing in real detail, and the detail was worse than the silhouette had been. It was scarred. Not battle-scarred, marked, trophy-marked. There were rows and rows of small, deliberate notches cut into the leading edges of the ship, hundreds of them, and I knew without being told what each notch was. A kill, a species, a culling. This ship was a tally. The first hunter wore his history on his hull, the way an old soldier wears it on his chest. And his history was a list of everyone he had decided was prey and proven himself right about. And he came in close to add me to it. I understand now that this too was deliberate, was almost ceremonial. He could have killed my scout from a distance without ever showing me his hull. He chose to come close. He chose to let me see the tally. He wanted the prey to understand in its last moments exactly what it was being added to. There was a courtesy in it, in its way, the terrible courtesy of a thing so certain of its place that it can afford to be gracious to the food. He was showing me the answer to the question. He was saying, "This is what you are, this is what you have always been, this is the only thing you could ever be, and now I will write you down." I held my note, I held my light. My hands were not steady, I will not pretend they were, but the tone going out of my transmitter never wavered because a machine does not have hands, and I had given the holding of the line over to the machine on purpose. I am here. I am here. I am here. Sekil opened fire. I need to be exact about this, because everything that came after turned on the exactness of it, and because for years afterward there were people, our own people, who wanted the story told a different way, who wanted us to have struck first, because it is easier to be the hunter than to admit you were nearly the prey. We did not strike first. The first hunter, Sekil, certain of the answer, impatient with the formality of a kill he had already decided was finished, fired on a single lit scout that had done nothing but hold position and play a steady tone. One shot, almost lazy. A predator does not need to put its whole weight into a killing bite when the thing in its jaws has already gone limp. He fired to write me down. He missed, barely. I had been drifting very slightly in the dead river's pool, the way a corpse drifts, and the slight drift was enough. The shot went wide of my cabin and took the scout's lower wing clean off, and the cabin filled with the noise of my own ship coming apart, alarms and venting and the sick lurch of a thing that is no longer whole. The lights I had turned on flickered and most of them died. I spun. The graveyard wheeled around me, the dim star and the dead ships and the 4 Talons around, and through the spin and the alarms I did the last thing I had left to do, which was to keep my thumb down on the transmitter, to keep the note going out of whatever was left of my antenna, because as long as the note went out I was still here, still saying it, still refusing to be written down. I am here. I am here. I am. The Lodestar answered. I did not see it begin. I was spinning, half blind, my ship gutted, and the first I knew of it was that the dark behind the 4 Talon ships was not dark anymore. It had opened. That is the only way I have ever been able to describe it. The void behind the Predators simply opened, the way a wall opens when a door you did not know was there swings wide, and out of the opening came light, not weapons fire. Not yet. Just the running lights and the drive glow of a thing so much larger than the Talons that for a confused half-second my spinning brain refused the scale and decided I was looking at a moon that had come unmoored. The lodestar was a wedge. A long armored wedge of a ship, kilometers of her, scarred herself but scarred the human way, patched and welded and used, soot-marked along her gun lines, her hull a working hull, a hull that had been somewhere and done something and come back to do more. She had been there the whole time, drifting cold in the dead river the same as I had taught myself to do, the mousetrick written large enough to hide a cruiser. And now she was done hiding. She came up behind the pack with her gun lines already trained, her escorts 4 of them, gunships, lean and ugly and purposeful, fanning out from her flanks into a killing arc of their own, a mirror of the arc the Korvath had drawn around me, drawn now around the Korvath. And she did not fire. That was the part the Korvath could not parse. I have spent decades since then with the analysts and the diplomats and the historians, and the thing they come back to, again and again, the thing that mattered more than any shot, was the half-second the lodestar did not fire. By every law of the Korvath universe, the thing that comes up behind you and has you cold does the one thing a thing in that position does. It bites. The whole logic of the apex, the entire architecture of a civilization built around the question, are you prey or hunter, depended on the certainty that a hunter that has you bites. And the lodestar, having come up behind the apex predators of the galaxy with every gun she had trained on their unguarded backs, with the kill not just available but free, with the firing solution locked and the first hunter's spine in her sights held. Brandt's voice went out on the open channel, the loud one, on every frequency at once, and I heard it crackle through what was left of my own dying systems even as I spun. She did not send a tone. She sent words, and she sent them slow, and the analysts had done their work, and behind her words ran the braided pattern of the Korvath's own chemistry, their own language of scent rendered into signal, the best translation our people could throw together in the minutes they'd had. I do not know how good the translation was. I know what she said in our tongue because I have read the log 100 times, and I know that whatever the Korvath actually received, they received it well enough. She said, "First Hunter, you asked the question, here is the answer, we are neither." And then the lodestar fired once, the way Sekul had fired once, deliberately, precisely, a single shot from her forward battery, and she put it not into the first hunter's hull but across his bow, close enough to wash his sensors white, close enough to rock him in his own drive wake, a shot placed with the kind of care that takes more skill and more confidence than a killing shot does, because a killing shot only has to land and a warning shot has to land exactly. It was a shot that said, "I can reach you." It was a shot that said, "I have chosen not to." It was the single most expensive sentence a warship has ever spoken because every credit of its cost was in the restraint, in the deliberate burning of a free kill, and the Korvath, whatever else they were not stupid. They had built an empire on reading the gap between what a thing could do and what it chose to do. They understood instantly and completely what they were being shown. For a long moment nothing in the system moved that was alive. My scout spun. The dead ships turned. The dim star bled its weak light over all of it. 4 Talon ships hung frozen with a cruiser at their backs and a gutted scout at their front, and between the two of us, between the thing they had nearly killed and the thing that had nearly killed them and chosen not to, the question they had asked of the entire universe for longer than my species had been upright simply came apart. Are you prey or hunter? The small thing in front had refused to be prey. The large thing behind had refused to be hunter. And there was no third box. There had never needed to be a third box. The Korvath had crossed the galaxy filing every living thing into one of 2 drawers and had never once, in all that time, met something that would not fit in either. And now they had met it twice in the same minute, in the same place, two faces of the same impossible animal, the small one that would not flee and the large one that would not bite, and the drawer they did not have was the only drawer we belonged in. Sekol did not answer with words. He answered with his ship. The Talon turned slowly, deliberately, presenting its flank to the lodestar. And I have been told by people who study these things that this was the most that a creature like Sekol could possibly say, that to a Korvath the flank is the throat, that to turn your unprotected side to a thing that could kill you is the deepest sentence in their whole grammar, a sentence with no equivalent in ours, a thing past surrender and past truce, a thing that means, I acknowledge that I do not understand you, and I am choosing to live with not understanding rather than die proving I was right. He showed the lodestar his flank. And then, one by one, the other three Talons did the same, turning their throats to the cruiser and held there exposed for the count of 10, and then folded their fans and broke off and went, slow and unhurried, the way they had come, back into the dead river, back the way that led out of the system and out toward wherever it is the Korvath keep the tally of everything they have ever decided about everyone. They left me alive. They left me alive in a wrecked scout, spinning half my air gone, and that too was a sentence, though it took me a long time to learn to read it. They had come to write me down, and instead they left me unwritten, the one mark they did not make, the kill they did not take, and I have come to believe that of all the notches cut into that ancient hull, the deepest one is the one that isn't there. The lodestar came and got me. Brant put a recovery boat out before the last Talon was clear of the system, against every rule of holding formation against a possible reversal, and they cracked my dead scout open and pulled me out into the light of the boat's cabin. And the first thing I did, I am told, because I do not remember it, was ask whether the note had still been going out at the end, whether I had still been saying it. A young recovery medic, who had been a child when I started flying and who is an old woman now, told me she said yes. She told me the note was the last thing my scout was still doing when they reached it, a thin, steady tone going out of a broken antenna into a graveyard. I am here, I am here, I am here, long after the lights had died and the air had gone and the man in the cabin had passed out from the spin. She told me she did not know why a wrecked man would care about that. She told me she has thought about it for 40 years, and she thinks she knows now. I have spent the rest of my life among the consequences of that minute, and I will not pretend the minute was the whole of it. The treaty came later. And the long, careful decades of learning to speak to a thing that thinks in scent, and the slow business of teaching the Korvath that the drawer they did not have was not a flaw in us but a flaw in the question, and most of that work was done by better people than me, in rooms I was never smart enough to sit in. The histories are full of those people, and they should be. I was a tired old recon pilot who got his ship shot out from under him because he was too stubborn to run, and if Brant had been an hour further back, or the analysts a little slower, or the dead river a little thinner, the story would have ended with a fresh notch on an ancient hull and no one left to tell it differently. I know that. I have always known that. Brave men who die alone in the dark do not get listened to. Stubborn men who happen to have a cruiser coming up behind them get treaties named after the systems they bled in. I have never once mistaken the luck of it for anything else. But here is the thing I have come to in the long, slow years since, the thing I tell the young ones when they lean in toward me like I am a fire and ask what it felt like the first time. I tell them it did not feel like courage and it did not feel like fear. I tell them it felt like being seen wrong. I tell them that the worst thing in the universe, worse than the guns, worse than the cold, worse than the spin and the dying air, is to have a thing look at you and decide what you are for before it has ever actually looked at you at all, and that the only answer to it, the only one I have ever found, the only one I had in the cabin and the only one I have now, is to turn your lights on, to stop hiding, to stand in your own small glow in the middle of the graveyard and hold one steady note and say, plainly, to the thing that has already decided you are nothing, I am here. I am not what you assumed. Come and look. Come and find out. They came, the apex predators of the galaxy, certain to their bones of the answer. They came to write us down. And the first time they truly looked at us, at one stubborn man who would not flee and one great ship that would not bite, they found a thing their oldest question could not hold, and they turned their throats to it, and they went home to think. That is the whole of it. That is what it felt like the first time. Not a triumph, a correction. The galaxy's hunters learned, in the light of a dying star, that there was a kind of thing they had never had a drawer for, and that the kind of thing was us, and that we had been there all along in the dark with our lights off, waiting only to be asked the right question, or, failing that, to refuse the wrong one with everything we had. The star is still dying out there, slow, the way old stars do. The wrecks are still turning. There is a marker in the system now, a small one that the Korvath helped us place, and it says nothing about a battle because there almost wasn't one. It marks the spot where a question came apart. I have been back once, an old man in a quiet ship, and I turned my lights on and held a single note for a while in the dark, for no one, for nothing, just to feel it again. Just to say it again to the dead and the dim star and whatever else might be listening out past the edge of the light. I am here, I am here, I am here. And the dark, for once, did not answer with anything that had already decided what I was.